Hello, I'm Mary Valentich, a Professor Emerita in the Faculty of Social Work, University of Calgary. I've had a long and very happy and rewarding social work career, over 50 years. I'm delighted today to be speaking to you about my professional social work journey. Social work is almost limitless in the kind of opportunities it presents to its practitioners. You may be interested in working with individuals, couples, families, organizations, nations even, or you see yourself as a clinician primarily, but maybe you're also interested in research or education, or you're an activist. All of these are possibilities and more. I haven't even touched on all the possible opportunities that social work presents. Let's look at my own career. I began as a case aide in a general hospital in Hamilton, Ontario, and the next summer I could work as a family counselor, again in Hamilton, Ontario. I began my first full-time position at Lakeshore Psychiatric Hospital, beautiful grounds on Lake Ontario with huge buildings that we called cottages. They weren't really cottages, but that's where we worked. After a few years, I joined with some psychology colleagues, and we began the first adolescent unit based on a learning theory model. It was a fairly radical venture, including the prescribing of birth control pills to some of the adolescent girls. It was radical because that wasn't legal until 1969. In 1968, I joined the faculty at the St. Patrick's School of Social Welfare at the University of Ottawa. That was later transferred to Carleton University. At the same time, Jim Gripton was hired as a new faculty member, and that was very important to me, especially personally in due course. He and I shared many of the same ideas and values and beliefs, and we too embarked on a rather revolutionary project. I had started my private practice, and the first client presented a sexual problem, and I was really unprepared, as most social workers were. Well, Jim and I got the idea of a proposal for a course in human sexuality, and after 2 years of opposition and lots of lobbying on our parts, we got the course approved. I'm happy to say that now practice in sexual problems is a legitimate, recognized part of social work practice. In 1973, I headed off for my doctoral program at the University of Denver. That was when Jim and I also became personal partners. In 1976, he joined the faculty at the School of Social Welfare at the University of Calgary, and his job was to develop a proposal for a social work PhD program. I joined as a full-time member in 1977 and taught human sexuality, interpersonal communication, and a number of other courses. I also developed my own private practice, earned my certifications as a sex educator and sex counselor. In the 90s, I became advisor to the president of the university, Murray Fraser, on women's issues. And that really firmed up my activist role because I became known for speaking up not only about women's issues, but a whole range of issues. So those are just some of the experiences and opportunities that I had. And I wager the same is true for most social workers, if they're interested in having a wild and wonderful career. Well, I've already alluded to the number of opportunities that social workers have, and of course all of those involve choices. I'm going to focus primarily on the ideological and theoretical choices that one makes. Now you may think, well, that's pretty abstract. Why is that so important? Well, your worldview and the theories that you choose underpin your personal and your professional behavior. In social work, we really emphasize self-awareness, knowing what your attitudes, beliefs, values are. So it's really central to develop knowledge about what you believe in. And that's where social workers can focus on their reading, on their courses, and also if they can get good supervision, they will develop that self-awareness. Some of the choices that I made involved my moving from honors sociology in my undergraduate days to social work. I realized through my recreational summer employment in day camping that I really like to apply knowledge. I wanted to work directly with people in a face-to-face manner. And so I discovered social work. It seemed to make sense to me, much to the dismay of my sociology profs who thought I should go on in sociology. And I really did love studying people and cultures. At any rate, I did go into social work, and that was an excellent choice for me. At the same time, in that era of the late 60s, feminism as a social movement was emerging. And I realized very much that I was in the forefront of social change related to equality for women and men. And actually, feminism enabled me to perceive discrimination against all groups. So that was really exciting. And that kind of ideological perspective really guided me in a number of ventures. For example, in 1975, 3 of us initiated the first Rape Crisis Center in Ottawa, Ontario. And when I moved to Calgary in 1976, I joined a collective of women here, and they were working on developing a rape crisis center. They liked the model of a community agency and adopted it, and we began the Calgary Rape Crisis Center in 1976. Another interest for me has been the elimination of sexist language, and the biggest project I worked on was with a group of people, I will say a small group. We called ourselves Calgary Citizens for Calgary Counselors. That's what it was. We did everything we could from the time I got involved in 1987 with a letter to the editor and to the then mayor, Ralph Klein, to persuade people that maybe using the term alderman was not perhaps the smartest thing to do, because an image of a man comes up, and we all want to encourage women to go into politics. It was only one aspect of the issues, but it was an important aspect. It took us from 1987 until 2010, I think, was the third motion that we finally got passed, thanks to a new mayor, Nahid Nenshi, who was elected that year. The change took place in 2013. Well, you can see how long social change takes, but persistence, patience can pay off. And that's when you need a group like Social Workers for Social Justice. That's an interest group that we have here in Calgary, and we focus on all kinds of social issues, from LGBTQ, trying to work on poverty issues, Indigenous aspects. All of these are important, and social work has a long history of working on such issues. But you do need like-minded people to work with, and I've had the good fortune to find lots of people like that in my career. At the same time that we started Social Workers for Social Justice, I also helped found another group called Calgary Climate Action Network, CCAN. It's a grassroots action group where we really try to raise awareness about what it takes to have a healthy environment. Another issue that's really occupied me in the last 3 or 4 years has been that of assisted dying. My good friend of over 30 years, Hannah Schaefer, received the first court-ordered exemption for assisted dying. It took over 3 years, and by the time we went to court on February 25th, 2016, she could not talk, she could not walk, she could only type with 4 fingers of her hand. We had a lot of obstacles. That issue isn't going to go away. There are still many aspects that we need to focus on, such as advance directives. So you can see I had a lot of choices, and in all of them I was guided by my ideology and by my theoretical perspectives, in particular cognitive behavioral theory and a systems approach. And in choosing such perspectives and feminism as a worldview, I had a lot of good guidance, good mentors, like my first director and professor, Swithin Bowers, Frank Turner, and of course my partner, Jim Gupton. So those are some of the choices that I've made. And with good guidance, you can make, I think, excellent choices. I'm a very optimistic person, as you can tell. I really have a positive outlook on life in general. But yes, there can be a downside. For example, it can take a long time to bring about social change. And so you have to learn how to be patient and how to collaborate and rely on others, handle disagreements that you may have, and recognize that sometimes the goal, a better life, is one that takes a long time. And of course, people have different ideas of what is a better life. It isn't social work's role to impose our notions of a better life, but to work with people, and people may have differing views. Also, social change is controversial. So you might get involved in some aspects of change where your own career goals are questioned. They may even be thwarted because you might be labeled a bit of a troublemaker. Now, that doesn't happen always, but in some situations it is risky for social workers to speak up, and that's when they need the support of a group like Social Workers for Social Justice. In some circles, our reputation isn't that high. We've made mistakes individually and sometimes as a profession. For example, now people are reviewing, what did we do during that 60s scoop when Indigenous children were picked up and taken away from their families? I'm convinced that social workers were trying to act in the best interest of children, but nonetheless, those children lost their cultures and their identities. And so we need to review those kinds of situations and think, how could we have handled this differently in a way that respects people's identity and culture? So we can learn from our mistakes. But frankly, if you're looking for lots of worldly acclaim, it may not happen because, as I say, in some circles, our reputation is not all that high. On the other hand, as a positive person, I'm elated by the fact that we have 6 people with master's degrees in social work in the provincial legislature in Alberta right now in 2018. And I think there may even be a couple more who have a social work background. That suggests that people are really recognizing that we can make a contribution. We have a system perspective and we can see how things go together. And I think we can make some good, sensible decisions about how to move into the future. Well, I think the future holds promise for all of us. I think research is really important. We need to continuously evaluate our practice to make sure that we're not just being trendy or getting caught up in something. We need to know what we're working on. My late partner, Jim Grifton, was a strong advocate of a practitioner scientist model, or scientific practitioner, however you want to say it. He really believed that each person could use technology to evaluate their practice and make sure that what we were doing was effective. So I think we're making great strides in that direction. Our research capacity is well recognized. And I think social work has great, a great following around the world. We're much more recognized for our working on all kinds of oppressive situations. And so we've tried to live up to our international commitments. We recognize we have a belief system that says we're all connected. So what happens in one part of the world affects us here. And so that makes me optimistic because we don't just dismiss people who we don't know or don't recognize. Similarly, in our own country or anywhere else, we recognize that a sense of belonging is really critical throughout the life cycle. So as long as we have that belief, we focus on civic engagement. I was on Mayor Naheed Nenshie's Civic Engagement Committee for 7 years, and we really worked hard to try to promote civic engagement, which now has become a component of social work practice. Recent movements, such as the Me Too movement, also, I think, make us realize that we haven't gone far enough yet in terms of helping people deal with some of the abuse and harassment in the workplace. No one should have to be abused or tolerate certain kinds of situations. I frankly thought we had done a lot in the 90s, but clearly we have not done enough. So that's another area where I think social work can really make an impact, to try to have workplaces and personal situations that are free of harassment. Finally, I think we need to work hard to make Canada a welcoming place for immigrants, refugees, Indigenous persons. We've tried to deal with racism, focused on diversity for many years, dealt with oppressive kinds of environments, but clearly we haven't gone far enough. And there are still many aspects of racism that present themselves every day. I find it frightening to see, in a sense, the rise of some hatred and divisiveness in our country. And that means, for me, that our work is not done and that social workers can really contribute to make Canada a really welcoming place for everyone so people can pursue their legitimate goals. Why am I optimistic? It's because there are people like yourself who are out there, who will have the knowledge, the skills, and the passion and commitment to really care about making a difference. I know that this will happen no matter whether you pursue social work as a career or choose some other venture. I wish you well.